I'm taking a old beat up house with maybe a cracked foundation and needs new, whatever work that house needs. And in one way or another, I'm going to fix up the asset and make it worth more money. And if you were to flip the house, you can turn it into a rental and continue to collect income. You can do that with a note. You can turn it into performing and collect income, or you can increase the value of the asset and sell it and liquidate and move on to the next deal.
Move over, baby boomers. It's time for Gen XYZ. It's time to stop waiting on the world to change. It's time to be the change. It's time to stop thinking about how your life can be better. It's time to start taking action, massive action, to improve your life. Join Zach Winter and Marco Rios every week as we learn how others had the grit, determination, and conviction to 10x their lives, and as we explore ways that can help you 10x your life.
Welcome to another episode of the 10X for Gen XYZ podcast. I'm Zach Winter.
And I'm Marco Rios.
And today, as our guest, we have Marco Bario, our good friend who specializes in note investing.
Oh man, this is a niche of real estate that not many explore. So I'm really excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, it's an area that, not a lot of real estate investors focus on, and it's really definitely a niche area, but an area where people do quite well. So Marco Bario, welcome to the podcast.
Marco, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me here. I'm going to close my email because it's going to keep dinging the whole time. I meant to do that.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll just cue up kind of an intro.
Okay.
It's interesting that all three of us had former lives in different fields. I was an attorney, and both you and Mark were in the entertainment industry. Mark was in front of the camera, and you were behind the camera, and you were very entrepreneurial and did quite a few different things, including having your own business. But why don't we start with talking about your former life and what you were doing before real estate and note investing?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me here, and congrats to you guys on the new podcast. I was really excited when you reached out to hear that you were starting this.
Yeah.
I will be a regular listener for sure.
That's awesome.
I appreciate you
Thank
guys
you.
a lot, and part of how I got to know you guys is for a short time there were in-person meetups.
Yep.
That I
Pre-COVID.
was attending. Yeah, pre-COVID, and then the world changed. So
Yeah.
I'm glad it's been made digital, and we get to keep doing this.
Absolutely.
So 10 minutes before I logged on for this, I had to look at my LinkedIn because I guess I'm at the age now I can't remember what I've done. So
It happens.
So I refreshed my memory so that I can download a little bit here and share it. I guess I've done a lot. I'm really on career 3. So I went to school in Boston, and I went to Emerson College, and I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. I wanted to be a director. Everybody in film school or TV school wants to be a producer, director, or writer. But then I came to Los Angeles. I graduated Emerson, and then I moved to Los Angeles within a week of graduation, and I got a job as a production assistant on a TV pilot. I was I was working for Vin DeBona, who's the creator of America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yes.
And
Right.
I was working on a pilot that he was producing, but because it was summertime and the regular staff didn't work during the summer, I actually had the job of going to the post office because people used to mail in videotapes back then, and picking
Wow.
up big parts of videotape submissions for America's Funniest Home Videos.
VHS.
Yes. So I worked for 10 years in TV production. So that's my first career. Like I said, I was a production assistant and started by getting lunches and delivering scripts and all that stuff. And I worked my way up to become a line producer. So as a line producer, I'm responsible for essentially, a line producer takes a script and is given a budget, and you're supposed to make that script on that budget into something that can be shown on television. That's your job as a line producer in television. So I'm not the writer, I'm not the director, ultimately not responsible for the creative content, but responsible to make sure that that vision ends up on the screen. I learned a ton. And I worked freelance, and unfortunately, I never made it onto a show that lasted for a long time. So I had a long resume. I learned a lot, and that's a great place to learn. but I had a long resume of shows.
Mhm.
And then when was married at the time, and when we were expecting our first child, I was working until 3 a.m. I was on stage and sometimes back at the office at 9, and frankly, not sure 3 months from then if if my show would get picked up for the next season. So I got a phone call from somebody who was looking to staff at a post-production facility. And post-production is everything that happens after the footage leaves a film set or a TV set. So editing, film developing back then, things like that. And that started my next career. I became an executive ultimately at Technicolor, and I oversaw theatrical production on the digital side of the business in Los Angeles. So I was sales and customer service. I was touching the projects in that way and involved in the workflows, but we were transitioning from a film-based finishing process for theatrical films over to digital-based processes, which are prevalent now. In fact, most capture is digital, but it wasn't at the time. So that was a really cool time to be in the industry. We developed some technologies that I didn't personally win, but our technologies and the team that developed won Academy Awards. Really, really cool time to be in that industry. So I did that.
What time period was that?
Boy, 2000, in the 2000s.
Like early 2000s?
Yeah,
before the crash.
It was until the crash. In fact, I had been at Technicolor and I left. I worked at Technicolor twice. First time I was there, I left because I followed our division head who was launching a new startup post-production facility with a lot of new technology. And I wanted to be a part of that. And we were funded by Wachovia. And Wachovia was one of the first banks and
wow.
As they were floundering and looking for someone to pick up their pieces, they called our loan. And it wasn't that we didn't have work. We were doing well. I think we were working on the first Twilight film at the time, and we were growing pretty quickly.
No kidding.
We lost our funding. I mean, we were still in startup phase. We couldn't.
So they had approved your loan, but because of the crisis, they basically had the capability to just call your loan and say, "Thanks, but no thanks. Give us our money back."
Maybe. And until this moment, Zach, I never thought about it, but maybe that's why I work with loans now. Maybe I learned from that experience,
right.
the good or the bad, which side I wanted to be on that.
Right.
But I didn't know because I wasn't involved in that side of the business, but I didn't know, but they can call a commercial business loan at will, and they did. So that was it for that. But I lasted a bit, a couple other startup endeavors in that world. And then the business was changing, partly because of technology, partly because of globalization. The work that we would require $1 million investment in a post-production suite was now done on $25,000 to $5,000 worth of portable computer equipment.
That's right.
And, continues to be more and more. And because of that, also the work had moved to markets all over the world. Production was shooting all over the world, and sometimes post services were staying in those local markets. Whether it was London or Canadian cities or New York City, it all used to be done in LA back then. So the writing was on the wall. Our business was shrinking. And I thought, gee, it's time for me to reinvent. And I've already done it once in entertainment. Maybe what I want to do is something that I can do from anywhere, and I can stretch myself entrepreneurially, which I'd started to do in my world, my entertainment time. And I poked around and tried a few things, and ultimately went to a real estate meetup. It was you guys know well, it was a for investors by investors meeting down in the South
Phoebe, right?
Phoebe, and it's like, man, this is incredible.
You were hooked.
Yeah, I was hooked.
And so, what did you focus on? Did you originally decide, I really like the idea of investing in notes, or did you start out with maybe in single family, or what was your first foray into real estate investment?
So this was 5 or 6 years ago. And first of all, and this happens not just to me, but I think everybody who starts to go to these meetings and check out different things online or what have you, there's shiny light syndrome all over the place. Every week is a new topic. and oh, I'm going to flip houses, but no, now I'm going to do commercial syndications. No, I'm going to do this. And it takes a little bit of time to just settle down, like, okay, take a lane.
100%. It's
Or,
very
or
true.
yeah, or kind of kick the tires on a few things. And my first investment, this, like I said, 5 or 6 years ago, and I called the top of the market early, but I was feeling the stock market was already looking frothy. It had already gone up a lot since the crash.
Mm-hmm.
And since it was mostly my retirement assets there, by going to these meetings, I learned, well, shoot, I can. And I guess we just got good news today regarding self-directed IRAs. It looks like they're going to pull those out of the reconciliation.
Fantastic.
That's good.
I don't know where this will ultimately be released, but that's the current state as of right now.
Yeah.
So I learned that I could move money from my stock market retirement IRA to a self-directed account.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that and started investing in syndications, which is a great place to learn because I found all these different asset classes that made sense and that were interesting. And although I'm not, you guys are general partners and sponsors, and the asset class that you're the sponsor of. But I was investing alongside sponsors who knew a lot about mobile home communities and self-storage facilities, and multifamily, and so I got to kick the tires on all these different asset classes and learn how these deals were put together. And I learned a lot in that process.
Let me ask you, for listeners who are interested in maybe investing in passive investments via syndications, what would you say investors might want to focus in, or what was your thought process in analyzing potential deals and determining which ones you were maybe interested in, which ones you weren't?
Well, I hinted at it just a moment ago that the secret weapon in all of that world is who you invest with. Me as an individual investor who knew very little about real estate, I would never have access to the deals that a seasoned sponsor has access to, the financing that a seasoned sponsor has access to, and then just the experience, because at one point or another, there'll be a bump in the road and something will happen. And I want somebody who knows the way around that, is going to protect my investment. So I can, as a limited partner, a passive partner in a syndication, I can ride on the coattails of people who are more experienced. So therefore, what it really goes back to is who I'm investing with. Of course, I want to be comfortable with the asset class. And of course, I want to do my own diligence to the level that I can on the investment. But who I'm investing with is critical.
Yeah. And just to put a little pin in and we'll talk about this probably in a later podcast, I'm sure, but you were passively investing in your IRA, which had turned into a self-directed IRA, but you can't invest in your own deals with your self-directed IRA. So you had to go out into the market and invest in third-party deals. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Which was fine for me. I just finished the what's the Simon Sinek book about finding your why that everybody talks about. I found that it's a great book, and so I'm all about whys right now, guys. I'm all about them.
That's great.
And I didn't realize, but at the time, my why back then was, this is money that I'm not going to touch for at least 10 years. That can afford to ride a little bit up and down some market cycles, but I don't want to get too crazy because 10 years isn't too far away. I mean, it used to be 10 years was one cycle. Now who knows how long this current cycle is.
Yeah.
So that was my why as to what that money was for and what type of investor I am in my retirement account. So does that answer your question? That guided where I was headed with those two investments.
Yeah, I think so. And it actually goes back to, I actually had an initial question when you kind of decided that you were going to, I guess, make the leap from your job at Technicolor and kind of get out of the entertainment industry. The question that came to my mind was, had you already started building and thinking about retirement at that point, or even beforehand? Because what I noticed, at least from being in the entertainment industry, I was protected by a union in a lot of ways, and being a working actor, was very fortunate to have a pension. Hopefully it'll hold up for the next 20, 30 years. But a lot of people that I knew, especially people that maybe were in your position as a line producer, as far as I know, you guys don't really have a pension, or do you? Is that something that
I was lucky because most of the work I did, I was working on network 4-camera sitcoms. That was my little niche within that world when I worked in production. And we were produced by studios who, in all my cases, not every studio did, but in all my cases paid into motion picture health plan. So I had health insurance. There was a small pension. It turned out not to be much. I've since rolled that over into my current retirement account. But I'll tell you a story about that, kind of a funny story. I got this job at Technicolor, and they sent me down to the human resources office, and I'd never been to a human resources office before. And she throws this packet in front of me that I can choose a health plan, and I can choose how much I want to contribute to my 401k, and they're going to match. And I'm like, wait, slow down. What are you talking about? All of this was new to me. I was a 30-some-year-old man sitting in front of her who'd almost never heard of benefits like this before. Because when you're in motion picture or any of the entertainment guilds, it's just automatic. I don't believe there's any choices. It's just, this is what you're going to get, and we'll send you your health card, and that's that. It's pretty good, but there were no choices. They didn't trust us with them, obviously. But man, that started my learning curve.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually great. And so were you in that time, were you already investing in the stock market? Just like, had you had your mind on that stuff, or were you just really focused on, meat and potatoes, working, socking a little bit of money away?
Oh no, I had the .com bubble scars to show that I'd been in
oh, really?
The stock market. Yes.
Wow. Yes. So the 98 crash of
yes, sir.
They didn't even call them unicorns back then, did they?
No, everything was a unicorn back then, or at least you thought.
Yeah, right.
Crazy. Well, it's funny because you see, I don't know if he started in the 90s, but maybe he did. But Jeff Bezos, talking about this idea about Amazon books and, an online library, and it's going to grow in the internet. And like, he was kind of part of that whole excitement of the web going on at that time. Who knew that he would have found some way out of that and not crash and burned? And maybe he came on the tail end of that. So maybe, he came after that crash. I'm trying to remember what the timing was. I feel like they came around in the late 90s, at least in the very beginning.
I don't remember, but he's done okay.
Yeah.
Not too shabby.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so you're investing in syndications, and then when did you decide you wanted to take the leap and invest on your own, and what did you choose to invest in?
Yeah, so I continued to go to these meetups, and so as a couple things simultaneously happened together. One, I'd made a pretty strong decision that I wasn't going to go back to the entertainment industry. I just didn't see a chair for myself in that world anymore. I was not in a chair at that point, to be honest. And I thought, well, this is what I want to do. So I've got these retirement investments that are passive, and once they're going, which is a great thing. But I want to get my hands dirty, and I want to dive into some stuff and learn, and I want to earn, grocery money. It's important. So I went to a meetup where there was a panel of note investors. And at the time, I would say if there were 5 people on that panel, 4 of them were in some way involved with non-performing paper notes, because and some of that inventory, I suppose, is still out there, although we're at the tails of it now. But when the 2008-2009 crisis happened, it was, as everybody knows, carnage in the mortgage markets, and so many loans went non-performing. And these gentlemen were all gentlemen, I think in this case, were out there at this time going to banks saying, we want to buy your non-performing loans. They're like, sure. Why would you want to do that? Yeah, there's a box in the back. Go have fun. And they were buying at 10 cents on the dollar or whatever that point was. I think Mark, you have some experience in that world. And man, I wish I was around at that time, because they were, pigs on whatever pigs are on. It was a crazy time. But they really created something that I'm not sure existed before at the private investor level, that I'm aware of at any significant scale. But I heard what they were doing, and I thought not only is, gee, it's a great way to make a lot of money really fast, because real estate investors love that. You learn that there's always corners that you don't see when you start. But I also saw so much creativity in what they were doing. There were so many exits. You can foreclose and take back the house. You can file foreclosure, but hope that it really brings the borrower to the table for a modification. You can do so many, there were so many exits and so many creative strategies, and you had to know your way around title, and you had to know your way around lots of legal things. And you had the opportunity to work in different states and never have to travel to these houses, but, just accumulate a lot of assets all over and learn the local laws and work with different teams. And frankly, a lot of that mindset wasn't too dissimilar from working on television productions, where it's a big crew and you're in, you're out, and the pace is hectic and all these things. It really appealed to me. So that's why I decided, okay, I'm going to pick a lane here, and this is my lane.
So you started with non-performing notes, with just for our listeners, a note can be performing or non-performing. Performing is the borrower debtor is current in their payments, and non-performing is they're behind in their payments.
Yeah.
And you started in non-performing.
Yeah. To which most people I talk to say, why would you buy something that's not paying? And it's really, everybody understands house flips because they watch the house flipping shows, and people think that's what real estate investing is. And non-performing note investing essentially is flipping notes. I'm taking an old beat up house with maybe a cracked foundation and needs new, whatever work that house needs. And in one way or another, I'm going to fix up the asset and make it worth more money. And if you were to flip the house, you could turn it into a rental and continue to collect income. Well, you can do that with a note. You can turn it into performing and collect income, or you can increase the value of the asset and sell it and liquidate and move on to the next deal. And that's pretty much what you can do with notes as well.
And when you buy a non-performing note, say for example, the balance that's owed is $100,000, you're discounting that balance and paying a much less amount because it's non-performing. You're going to have to go in and somehow either take over the asset, the underlying asset that the note's secured by, or get the debtor to start paying again in some way or another. And so in consideration for all that time and effort and risk, you're buying it at a reduced value. And when you buy it at a reduced value, that impacts the return. So even if you get them to start paying back the initial payments, because what you're paying to buy the note is less than the overall principal, the return is now higher for you. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. I think the overall, just if I can just jump in there, the overarching kind of theme with that is there's a difference between your yield as an investor and the coupon or the interest rate that's on the face of the note that you're purchasing. And your yield could be much higher than just the interest rate based on, how much you might discount. If it's a non-performing note, based on how much you discount the purchase price from your end.
Yeah, I'll make up numbers, but let's say that $100,000 note, let's say it's a performing note. Let's take non-performing out for a second. Let's say that note has 100 payments remaining of whatever they are per month, but the interest rate is 5%. So the balance is $100,000, and I'm making up numbers. But let's say I buy the asset for $70,000. My return isn't 5%. My return is 8 or 9 or whatever percent is, because I bought it at a discount. That's in essence what it is.
Yeah.
I highly recommend everybody who invests in real estate take some class or do some education around the financial calculator. It's such a, people see it sort of as the abacus of early real estate investors, but man, and you can do all the same stuff in Excel, but understanding it's 4 simple keys, which are the yield, the number of payments, the monthly payment amount, and the interest and the starting balance. And you can do all sorts of things. It's really, you can get so creative.
Well, one thing that fascinates me too about this part of it is you don't even have to purchase a note in the middle. You can buy the remaining payments. You can buy only a certain amount of payments. you can give the note back after you've basically bought some of those payments. Like it's really fascinating to me how deep the well can be on how, how these notes work. It's pretty incredible.
You know what got me is one of these early educational events I went to around notes. Someone pointed out this, think of every major city in the United States. What's the tallest building in that city? It's got the logo of a bank on top, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
I get it.
Okay.
Be the bank.
There you go.
Okay, so in terms of the notes that you're doing right now versus when you started, I'm just trying to go back and just kind of think a little bit about somebody starting out, and they may try to do wholesaling, say, to try to build up a nest egg, but maybe they have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. I'm just wondering, starting out in notes, is it something that they can start with a very small amount and work their way up, or like, how does that work? Or do they have to go ahead?
Yeah, yes and no. So I had this retirement account, and I knew that, I felt safe because I'd done okay in the stock market at that point and built it up to a good amount. So I didn't start with nothing, but I had an opportunity, and it was Matt Owens, and he runs one of the Phoebe chapters, two at the time, and he has a business where he does buys houses, and at the time it was centered in Memphis, fixes them up, sells them off to investors, usually carries back the financing. So he's creating a seller finance note, and then the investor holds the property, and it's a rental, and it's called a turnkey model for those who aren't familiar. That's turnkey rentals. And I knew he had these, and I know Matt, and I think a lot of him, and he offers them at par. Now, I don't buy notes at par anymore, but I was happy at that time to go buy a note from Matt because I knew him and I trusted him. And I knew that if things really, really got bad, there's no guarantee, but I knew that Matt would somehow make good on the deal. But it just took me through the process of buying paper. I bought a house before because I lived in a house and had a mortgage on the house. I knew what that looked like, but I'd never bought paper before. And as simple as it sounds, it was just a good education. It was a boring asset. I sold it recently, what was left of it, because it was 7%, not so great. But I learned so much from it, what the paperwork looked like, what the process was, recording the assignment. It's not hard, but I just wanted to get one under my belt. So I didn't dive into some non-performing, messy, that came very soon after, and I dove into the deep end, believe me, because that's how I do things. But I just wanted one under my belt, like, oh, I get it. Okay. Boarded it with a servicer, the whole nine, I just wanted that experience.
And that's a great point. That makes a lot of sense. And that's a really great point, because in the note business, especially starting out, you can do exactly that, where if you're not in contact with somebody doing seller finance notes, you can also find mortgage brokers that are doing hard money loans, a little bit riskier, but the ones that are successful, they back their notes and they put out very solid 12-month, notes out there for sale for note investors to basically fund those deals. So those are available too for people just starting out, if they want a performing note.
Yeah, I would recommend that as well. The hard part is those are often bigger. Well, we're in Southern California, right? So I looked into that, and they were, they need $200,000 for this deal.
Yes,
that's a little more than I want to start with. But you could certainly do that in other markets at a lower price point if you didn't want to go that much.
Yeah, and we know a guy. I think we know a guy that does these tiny. He's known as the tiny note guy.
Andy.
Oh, Andy. Yes, that's right. He fixes up mobile homes, and then he sells them with owner financing, and then he'll sell the notes.
Yeah,
exactly.
But those aren't real estate. I mean, that's a bit off on a tangent here, but they're technically not real estate. It's more like a loan on a car.
That's right. They're not.
Their titles at the DMV, not at the county recorder's office.
That's right.
Which I'm sure Andy likes very much.
Sure.
The title's in his file cabinet, and that's where it's staying.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
So your second venture ended up being non-performing. The second note that you bought?
So I thought, gee, you know, on this tack of I really want to learn by doing, I'm going to, and then even real estate's full of niches, right? You're a house flipper,
Yes.
you're a wholesaler, you're a this, you're that. Some of the people I've met, and you guys know as well, they can do everything. They're so smart and they know so much. I thought, yeah, I really want a toolbox. So I don't want to just do one thing. So in the non-performing note world, and still today, people say, do you do first or seconds? Do you do, you know, senior liens or junior liens? Because you can buy non-performing seconds. Do you buy bankruptcy? Do you not buy bankruptcy? I was like, I don't know. I kind of want to do it all. Why not? So why not go out and find one of each? And I compare it to Houdini. He would say to, you know, his assistant or whoever, you're going to handcuff me, you're going to tie this rope around me, you're going to drop me into this tank of water, you're going to put a lock on the thing, and I'm going to figure out how to get out. Now, he already kind of knows how to get out, but he sort of, you know, you never know. You never know. And that's what buying a non-performing note really is. Every time, don't, you know, some people may have done 2,000 of them. There's a little Houdini in every one, believe me. But for me, starting out, I thought, I'm going to start with seconds, not because I want to be a seconds guy. And I thought I saw some great advantages there, but because the price points were lower and I could go buy a few of them, you know, because usually a second lien, you know, go get a second on your house. It's a smaller balance.
It's a lower amount.
So I can buy more of those and go, first of all, spread my risk around, but also get more types of experiences. So I bought a few in different states, and yes, I bought in bankruptcy and, you know, just different situations to see how I could get myself out of them.
And you got yourself out of all of them.
I have one left. I'm
You're looking at
calendar.
it.
I had a foreclosure sale. I had a foreclosure sale yesterday in Ohio. Thankfully, in Toledo. Thankfully, I did not get that house. I didn't want that house, so that was good. I have one left.
And do you have a process? Or just speaking on that before we go on to the next, do you have a process when you take over those houses? Do you have a team that will come in and kind of dispose of it, like an agent out in those local markets? Or are you flying out to see the house and all that stuff?
I've taken back a couple. Again, I built up this portfolio, and they lingered for a while. You know, don't believe the gurus who tell you, you know, you're going to turn these in 6 months. It often would happen. And of course, then we had this pandemic. I was really close to getting rid of the last ones. We had this pandemic where there were no foreclosures. So
That's right.
But anyway, yeah, within the last, I say last year, because I kind of forget this pandemic happened. It was like a time warp. But last couple of years, I guess, I took a couple back, and I'd been lucky. Everything had been modified up until then. I really targeted loans. I didn't want the property because I'm buying all over the country, and it's hard enough dealing with local contractors, but, you know, try dealing with them remote. And so anyway, there was one in Maine that I took back. It was a very, very old farmhouse, New England farmhouse. So old, in fact, it was older than, I can't remember the date it was built, but I looked at when Maine became a state, and it was built before Maine was even a state. It was
no kidding. Wow.
And that one was kind of fun. I did contact a couple realtors, and they said, you know, frankly, in that town where it is and that price point, it's kind of not worth our time. And okay. So I decided to, and I'm using these two examples because I think they really illustrate different things that are beneficial to know about. I listed it myself using Craigslist and Facebook. Because it was in a remote place in Maine, I felt comfortable enough to just have a locksmith go to the house and put a push button lock on the house. So people would contact me, and I'm in Los Angeles. These people were in Maine looking at a farmhouse in Norridge Walk, Maine. And they would contact me, and I'd say, great, I'm going to send you a link to this Google form. It was a real pseudo, you know, disclaimer, you know, you're not going to hurt yourself in the house, and if you do, it's on you, and you're going to turn the lights out, and you know, just a little thing. And I said, when you respond to this little Google form and I get that back, I'm going to send you the code, and you're going to tell me when you're going, and just call me when you leave. And I did, I don't know, 30 showings of this house.
Wow.
Amazing.
And it was great. And I found, and my goal, frankly, was to create new paper. My goal is always to have cash flow. Really,
Yeah.
I'm not a sell it at the end kind of guy. I like the cash
Yeah.
flow. So I'd taken a non-performing note. It was a long foreclosure in Maine. I foreclosed, took the property, and then I sold it to a great couple who pays me every month. You know, I got a down payment from them, and I turned it into a note.
Oh,
And I was able to do
fantastic.
that without a real estate agent, just an attorney to help with the closing. It was the same foreclosure attorney I'd used. So
Yeah.
So offering seller financing helped you basically sell a rural property, which are difficult to, it's a very small buyer pool, right?
Yeah.
Helped you kind of sell it a little bit easier, correct?
yeah, we sold the house for $60-some thousand. No, 50, yeah, somewhere in that range. I don't remember anymore.
Nice.
But,
Yeah. For a while, I was flipping land, and the seller financing makes it so easy to find a
does.
buyer, especially when you're dealing with land, because people can't go out and get financing on land. So, you know, that was a nice little niche, and I would do the paper as well, but dealing with much smaller dollar amounts than you're looking at. And what I found, at least with the land, was that oftentimes I'd sell the property with seller financing. The buyers would make payments for a couple of years, a few years, but then they never ended up building on the property. And eventually I took the property back and sold it to somebody else.
He's totally talking about me, because that's basically my story in real estate. I was 19 years old. I found a 5-acre piece of land. Some lady owned it, lived in Riverside, and it was up in the mountains, and I wanted to build a Christmas tree farm. And I bought it on a land contract, basically a seller finance note, and I had to give it back. Eventually I had no money. And my grandfather, who, you know, was amazing, and I loved the man so much, he was so angry at me that I had to, because, you know, he grew up at a time that it was all about land. And when he found out that I had to give that back, he was so angry at me. Because he was like, you know, he would have bought it, he would have sold it.
He
to me
wanted
again.
his Christmas tree.
Mark, you could
Oh,
probably
my
buy
God.
it back, because whoever ended up with it probably hasn't built on it.
That's right.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. The lady, she did the same just exactly what Zach was talking about. She took the cash flow, she, you know, upped the price a little bit, obviously, put it back out there with the local broker who was doing all the land deals out there. And they found another youngster that was driving through, you know, on a day trip, and they probably sold it to them.
I love
Low
it.
money down, low payments.
That's exactly it. It's so awesome. It really, but you know what? The seeing how that all worked, and me not knowing anything at that age really, really, really hooked me. That's what hooked me into real estate. I knew a little bit before that, but really, like, sitting down at that Red Robin or wherever we were, and I was signing, and I was like, I'm actually doing this. Like, you know, turned me into a real estate investor, and it really kind of guided that part of my life, you know, outside of my career for a very, very long time. You know, it's awesome.
There's such a difference between talking about it and doing. And I'm not going to go down that road of, you know, analysis paralysis, but there's that, like, it just sticks to you when you actually put your name on a line and say, you know, this is mine now.
Yeah.
One way or another, whether for me, the node and the syndications I invested in, that land. I know for me, and it sounds like maybe for you, it sticks to you. It really does.
It did. Absolutely. And that's, you know, that's actually one of the things that Zach and I kind of noticed about one segment, hopefully, of the people that are listening is there are some youngsters that are really focused on a lot of stuff that's happening online, you know, these meme stocks and all this craziness, that there is a chance that things can blow up in a lot of ways with crypto and you know, GameStop type of things, or buying into DWAC, you know, that thing that just happened with the media empire going on. And, you know, but there are ways of 10xing your lifestyle and your money in real estate that don't necessarily have to do with the traditional stuff. Yeah, it may take a little bit longer, or there's a learning curve, but you know, there's some interesting stuff going on too, especially with what you do.
Great.
Yeah.
So, Marco, let's talk about kind of what your approach is now, because I kind of hit on, like, tried out non-performing, and went through that cycle. But what's your focus right now in the note business?
So the non-performing loans I bought had been originated by banks. So that's called institutional paper. So it was, whoever at the time, whoever wrote loans that didn't underwrite them and they ended up paying for it one way or another. Oh, I'm sorry, the taxpayers paid for it, right?
Right.
But whoever paid for it. So in the status of that world today is there's still some non-performing paper. We will see more non-performing paper as now the foreclosure moratoriums are lifting and some of that stuff will work its way through. It's yet to be seen how much, because property values have appreciated so much, borrowers have equity where they didn't before. And so they have some options. They could sell a property rather than face foreclosure, for instance. So, but anyway, as I said, there were these group of pioneers who were going to banks, and banks were like, have at it. But then a lot of new laws were passed where banks couldn't keep this stuff on their balance sheet and they had to put it out into the marketplace. And Wall Street got on to, wait, there's a bunch of people that are making money. Well, we should be the ones making money. We're Wall Street, by golly. And so hedge funds grew and grew and grew and bought these assets. So combined with a lot of these bad assets that worked their way through the system, and there's a lot of money now in the marketplace, the pricing has gone up. I mentioned there are a lot of tails that are left for smaller investors. So unless, in my opinion, unless somebody is to raise a lot of money for a fund and go after large pools of assets higher up in the food chain, you're buying from bigger players who have larger pools of assets who they'll share with you, but they want you to write big checks when you buy. They don't want a guy to come in and spend $15,000 on a loan. It's not worth their time. So plus there's some risk for them that person doesn't know what they're doing, and it turns litigious and it bounces back into their court, and they don't want anything to do with that.
Right.
$15,000 sale. So they're not going to talk to you. So started for those reasons. I thought, gee, I really like notes. There are other kinds of notes in the world. You mentioned hard money loans, and I've looked into that a bit, but I really was interested in seller financing. So that is and continues to be a growth area for me, where I market directly to mom and pop note investors who sold a property, and we were talking about this earlier, in rural areas often, where or properties that banks don't like to finance, such as a mobile home with land, which is real estate because it's attached to the land. It's not just
right.
But those are two examples of where there's a thriving seller finance market, loan market.
That's super interesting. I mean, it's a niche where I wouldn't naturally think, oh yeah, there's a lot of seller financing out there, but it turns out there actually is.
It's too expensive because of the regulations for banks to underwrite below a certain threshold. So $50,000 loans mortgages don't really exist because the banks just can't make enough money on them. That's one thing. And they want to be able to sell off their paper. And if the property is a little oddball, if the borrower doesn't quite, fit the mold, W-2 income and check all the boxes, there's various scenarios. It's just not something the banks, any institution, Quicken Loans, whoever it is, or UWM or whoever interested in. So often people can't sell a property unless they offer seller financing, or I deal with a fair number of people who just sold it to somebody because they liked them and they were, whatever. Like I sold my house in Maine to a great young couple who, frankly, may not have qualified for traditional financing, but I felt comfortable because I did my own underwriting and I used third parties for that, but to verify their ability to repay. I felt comfortable providing them with the financing. And I felt more than that, I feel good about it. I think it helps build communities. Certainly, there's no marketing budget for the seller finance creation world. Quicken Loans isn't out there, saying, hey, we'll give you a great rate on a seller finance loan, because they don't do those. So it's not talked about, but yes, it exists in the world.
Interesting. And so you're buying seller finance notes. So somebody sells a home, kind of like Matt was doing, and provides seller financing, and you're buying that note kind of on the secondary market. And are these sellers like typically older in age and they've been getting payments, but at this point they just want a lump sum and to cash out? Or what's the
Yeah,
typical scenario?
I do get a lot of older in age. Because, frankly, younger people takes them long enough just to buy their first house. Then they have to live in it for a while and then sell it. So I do get older people, but I get some younger people too who need the money. There are all sorts of reasons. I just put on my Twitter feed today. I was contacted by somebody this week. She actually reps a woman. She's a always mess this up, Medicaid consultant.
Mm-hmm.
It's so confusing, of course, just like you need a tax consultant because the tax laws are complicated to a lesser degree. So, but also Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff is complex. This woman, I didn't know this existed before I got this call, is helping her client to qualify for long-term Medicaid. Mm-hmm. And in order to do so, she has to fall below a certain asset threshold where she can't qualify.
She has to divest herself.
Yes. So she owns a note and she needs to sell it. So that's an example of somebody.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Huh. And so you're interested in creating multiple streams of revenue, lots of streams of cash flow. Are you just buy and hold the note until it's paid off? Or, is there a play to take one of your streams of revenue and do you eventually sell it? Or how does that work?
I do two things on the acquisition side. One, I do buy notes for my own portfolio, but also, much like if anybody's familiar, listening is familiar with the wholesaling model for houses, the model there is that somebody markets to homeowners. In my case, I market to note holders who may want to sell their asset. I put it under contract, and then I essentially sell my contract to somebody who funds the deal, and then I make money on the spread. So I wholesale some of my deals as well because I need to buy groceries. That annoying fact. And as I build this business, I don't have, I'm still newish at this. I haven't been doing this for 20 years like some people in my industry have. And over time, I'll build a bigger portfolio and probably flip fewer deals. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's on the acquisition side, Zach. And then I do always have the option to recapitalize by taking ownership of an asset, collecting on it for a while, and I can sell what's left of it if I want at that point, or I can sell what's called a partial.
Right.
Partial is, think of a note as a piece of pie with a bunch of slices. I can sell a pie, the whole pie, or I can sell it by the slice.
So you could say, I've got the 20 years remaining on this note. I'll give you the next 5 years of payments, and you give me a lump sum. And then at the end, I take the note back and start getting payments again.
Correct.
Or is there's partials in actual ownership percentage too, right? That you could sell the entire timeline, but just give 20% of the note.
That's called a split partial.
It's really interesting because there can be lots of creativity and permutations. And
Andy Teasley, who we talked about, he loves to sell partials where you won't get any payments for 2 years, and then you'll start collecting payments. And then, but somebody else has the next chunk after you. He'll sell them in like 2-year chunks or 5-year chunks. So there's like a whole.
It can get it sounds like it can get as complicated as you want, but you definitely, just kind of coming back to the theme of 10Xing and systems and things like that, like you definitely have to kind of keep it simple, I guess, at least in the beginning, so you don't go crazy doing all these things and not being able to handle,
I'm hitting that. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm hitting that scale where I'm having to double back and remember that I'm actually building a business, not an investment portfolio. I'm building both. But because I sold a partial recently and I found myself spending way too much time on the paperwork, I said, gee, this is repeatable. I'm going to sell partials. The pricing will be different and who I sell it to will be different, but I really should streamline this. And the title companies I work with and the appraisers I work with. And I'm spending too much time on the back office stuff, and I'm a one-man shop. So I do outsource and through title companies and BPO companies and vendors that I use. But I'm a one-man shop. So I've doubled back to work on the business also.
Mm-hmm. So you're trying to put in some systems in place that will help streamline the process for these various types of notes and activities. Yeah, that makes sense.
And have you thought about any kind of expansion from this core business that you have? Any kind of courses or anything like that, teaching things like that? Or
have I thought about teaching? Yes. I'm not there yet. My biggest learning curve has been marketing. 70% of my time is spent on marketing. It cannot be underestimated when you're trying to reach out to individuals, consumers, mom and pops, the amount of marketing required.
Especially possible mom and pops that aren't necessarily tech savvy or even reachable in a lot of ways, right? They're typically
I do send direct mail.
Yeah.
And I also market online. And I look for referrals from attorneys and accountants and this person I'm dealing with, frankly, whose client is who's a Medicaid consultant. She could be a referral source. It just builds over time. But marketing is a big piece of what I do. So anyway, now that I've built this marketing system and I have more experience with it, I am looking to start acquiring rental properties. And the reason for that is I think we are currently in a higher inflation environment, and this may continue for a while. And the problem with notes, as great as they are, no tenants, toilets, termites, people talk about that. But in an inflationary environment, the value of my fixed monthly payment is worth less every month.
Right.
Whereas owning hard assets like real estate appreciate and tend to track inflation. So I don't want a portfolio that's 100% notes. Now I'm invested in syndications, and those syndications own hard assets, and I will share in that tracking of inflation, hopefully, plus value add and everything else that goes with those. But I do want to start accumulating a rental portfolio for that reason.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
On the note business, Marco, are you looking to also expand that by bringing in passive investors who want to invest with you, or you're keeping it strictly your own funds?
I'm open to passive investors who want to invest with me. I'm not at the point that I want to manage a fund. I like spending most of my time working with the note sellers. Stay tuned on that. I negotiate with myself on where I want to go on that topic.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, this has been great.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Really, definitely, it's a subject that very interested in. And anytime I talk about you could tell I get a little wonky about some things. Just really dig it. So it's good.
Yeah, no, Mark, I know you have a background, and Zach, I didn't know that you had flipped land before. I do. I was thinking as you said that I get calls sometimes from investors who want to liquidate a portfolio of notes, and some of those are land investors.
I had a specific strategy when I was flipping land. I had this thesis that I wanted to target areas that people would think, I'd love to build a second home there. I'd love to build a retirement home there. Wouldn't it be great to get a piece of land there? And then ultimately I'll build there. So I would find those areas. And then I would look for people who had owned land for a number of years and had been paying taxes on it, et cetera, and had just been land. And I'd reach out to them and, you know, buy it for pennies on the dollar. They were just looking to get rid of it because they decided they weren't going to build. And then I would market it. And, you know, I found it fairly easy to find people who would want to buy it that had that same kind of aspirational vision of eventually building, and especially with the seller financing. The problem I found with that approach to real estate investing is I was dealing with relatively small dollar amounts for the notes. So, you know, typically under $100,000. So it would take a lot of scale. And I just felt like overall it wasn't worth, my time was better spent pursuing larger assets because the returns were higher for the same amount of effort.
So that's the reason, so that's the reason I don't tend to spend a lot of time looking at a portfolio of land notes, because they're really not liquid for the reasons that you stated. There aren't a lot of other investors who are clamoring to take on notes that may go non-performing in 2 years, even though they can continue to find new buyers, and
right.
And they're people who build careers at a larger scale. People who are buying in the secondary market don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
And some of my buyers are banks, and some of them are individual investors. I mean, I do flip these deals to individual investors. If listeners are interested, that's a way we can work together. But probably, I would say my brand is offering paper to people and institutions that I expect will perform for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Marco?
I have a website. My company's Porch Swing Funding. So Porch Swing, like swing on a front porch, funding like money, .com. But the best way, you'll find out some about the business and about the notes that we buy. But the best way to reach me is just email. It's marco@porchswingfunding.com, or call. It's 818-330-1100.
Fantastic.
Great. Well, terrific,
Awesome.
Marco. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
I love
so
that I got to
great.
be on. Thank you, guys.
And it's so great to see your face. You know, we
Yeah.
really miss our in-person stuff. So
Oh,
you
I
always
know.
showed up. And so this is just fantastic.
A
Yeah.
quick question for you. I see you have a Believe sign with on yellow paper. Are you a Ted Lasso fan?
I love Ted Lasso.
That's
great.
I love Ted Lasso. It's a show about people becoming better versions of themselves. Why don't we have that
Exactly.
in the world?
I love it too. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
so
one
great.
of our favorites. All
All
right.
right.
Well, thank you, Marco.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with the podcast.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
10X for Gen XYZ is hosted by Zach Winter and Marco Rios, co-founders of Prosperity CRE, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and building long-term wealth. If you like the podcast, please give us a positive rating and subscribe to be notified about future content. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our approach to real estate investing, you can download a free copy of our real estate investment book, Investing for Cash Flow and Long-Term Wealth, by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thank you, and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes.